again, for those of you just joining us, we have the pleasure of hearing from CCA President Maria Starley and President-elect Ellen Kleinstuber. I actually want to continue on with this last segment where we've been talking about women in the profession with a couple other questions along these lines. Often people feel like they have the skills and ambition to get to the next level, but they don't necessarily know how to get their chance or get noticed. What advice do you have for someone looking to break out, especially in this virtual environment? Maria, I'll pose this to you first, just based off of your last comment from the last question about sometimes women just need to dive in and take on those roles that maybe they're uncomfortable for. So how do they do that?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, the perfect role that you want would come along and it'd be a very desirable role and all sorts of people would want it and you would make your case and people would give it to you and you would go from there. But in the real world, that doesn't usually happen. People don't give you assignments and roles if they don't already have some inkling that you can handle it. One thing that can really help and that worked for me is to look for something that's kind of in your area of interest that other people either don't want to do or don't have time to do, and then put your hand up. For me, in the mid 80s, what it was the non-discrimination testing regulations for pension. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, before the mid 80s, there were no non-discrimination rules. In the mid 80s, they came out with 3 or 4 sets of interrelated regulations. They had proposed regulations, reproposed again, and then final. And somebody had to get their hands around that, read them, summarize them, write memos, train people, figure out how to do the programming, write comment letters to the IRS. And it was a huge job that nobody really wanted to do. But it was, sort of in my wheelhouse because I like technical things. So I put my hand up and I got that project done. And because of that, people started to think about me for other things like that. There was a professional issues committee at my firm where, those are the people who read new regulations, wrote memos, trained people, and I was invited onto that and went from there. And, for everybody, it's going to be something different because obviously not everyone wants to be in the technical end, but there's always going to be something that, is a big job that other people don't want to do or don't have time to do. And if you put up your hand and you do that thing, and people see that you did a great job, you're going to be thought of next time other opportunities come up.
Ellen, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, Maria did a good job with sort of this, the big broad picture advice. So maybe I'll narrow in a little bit on the virtual environment part of this. Maria and I both work virtually most of the time. And for me, one of the best things that's come out of 2020 is the increased utilization of video conferencing like we're doing today. When I can't be in the office with my team on a daily basis and seeing them regularly on a video conference helps me feel more connected to them. My team is used to working together in the office day in and day out up until COVID hit. So this wasn't really something that they seemed to get, like, why is this important? But it does, as you point out, bring the challenge of, how do you stand out? Especially if you're part of a larger organization, you have lots of people that are vying for attention. So the first thing I'll offer up is be on video whenever you can. Now, I know sometimes, people staying off video, part of it's a bandwidth thing, right? Because it sometimes can chew up a lot of things. But I'll say whenever you can be on video, do that. It's one thing for people to hear your voice. It's another thing for them to be able to see you and read your body language. That's going to be maintain that closest thing to the in-person dynamic that you can do. So I try to suggest people think about it. If you were in the office and you've got a meeting coming up, could you get away with just calling into that meeting from your office rather than coming to the conference room for it? If the answer to that is no, then put yourself on video and be present and be seen in that meeting. Now, understand, talking to that little white dot on your webcam that I'm looking at right now, it can be daunting if you haven't practiced for this. This comes up a lot of times when the CCA is recruiting speakers for their webcast series, because it's different talking to a little white dot than it is even sitting on a dais and looking out at people. You can't see their reactions, engage whether or not you're resonating with them. So if you have the opportunity, you're going to be presenting virtually and you haven't done it before, ask for the chance to do a dry run with someone else who's on the team or with your manager. If you're concerned that you're not going to present as well in person or in video as you might in person. And I'd also then say, just take the initiative to keep open communication with the people on your team, with your manager, and where it's appropriate, if there's leaders in your practice or your organization. As managers, we have a lot more on our plate these days. For me, like my workload seems to have doubled in COVID. I don't have to travel anymore, but I'm even busier because I have all the work I used to do. And then there's managing issues of a virtual workforce and dealing with COVID. So we get busy. So for individuals to put forth that little bit of extra effort and reach out, making it easier for managers and leaders to stay connected to you will be very helpful for them. And you showing that initiative, I think, will stand out.
Excellent. This next question was something that one of our attendees submitted here. And I'll preface this by saying we're actually in a pretty unique part of our profession's history, in that, so we mentioned the two of you in your leadership roles within the CCA. SOA's president-elect is a woman. The current Casualty Actuarial Society president is a woman. You've got the president-elect over at the Academy is a woman. And then Lauren Oakham, who just finished up her presidential year at the American Society of Enrolled Actuaries. And then you've got our CCA member and former SOA president and current IAA president, Tanya Manning. We've actually had quite a few, we currently have quite a few women in these leadership roles, but that's historically not been the case. Why do you think it's been that we've had so few women in actuarial leadership roles? And what do you see as the barriers that have existed in the past?
Well, Michael, before we jump into that, I just want to point out one other person, the American Society of Enrolled Actuaries. You mentioned Lauren Oakham, their current president, going out, but their president-elect, Virginia Wentz, is also obviously.
Thank you for that.
So we've got, I think this is the first time in history that all 5 U.S. organizational president-elects are women. So I guess that didn't really answer your question, but I just wanted to get that. I want to make sure we don't give Virginia a short
Yes,
trip.
no, I appreciate that.
Why has there been such a dearth of women in leadership positions? I'm gonna say I don't know why. I can take a guess at some of the reasons. And things that come to mind is it's been, some of us have seen her. I think Maria's first kind of entrance into the profession, where she did have a lot of women in leadership roles within the practice, was different than maybe many of us have come to. So I think women, seeing more women rise up into leadership roles. I think you do have the sort of the legacy reality of women taking breaks to go raise their families. And now you're starting to see that balancing out more. You're getting more men taking that lead. And that's, I think allowing more women to continue to advance to leadership roles in their career and within the organizations. I think it's some of the dynamic that's just going on in the world today, where has been and continues to be a focus on diversity and giving more opportunities to a wider variety of people. And I'm going to guess Maria has some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, they're not very different. I mean, I think it's largely a demographic and generational thing. If you look at the older folks in the profession, they are largely men, a very high percentage. And who becomes on the leadership tracks of organizations? It's people who've done a lot of volunteering throughout their life, and the same pressures that women face with being caregivers give them perhaps less time for volunteer efforts. And, that's thankfully changing a bit over time, but that's the legacy reality.
So what advice would you give to a woman who wants to move beyond maybe the typical actuarial role and into a leadership role, both maybe at work and also within the profession? Maria, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, within the profession, I think it all comes down to volunteering. And this is something you can start, very small with. One thing you can do is what I did. The very first thing I did was getting involved with the exam process. If you can become a grader of an exam, a writer of an exam, if there was an exam you did particularly well at, or that the subject matter really appealed to you, that's a great way to get involved. And there are so many other ways to get involved. I got involved as a speaker very early on, which was very difficult for me. Speaking in public was something that I was terrified of when I was younger. But that's, doing that, not only develops you technically, because you really have to develop yourself technically to be able to speak on a topic, but it's enormously helpful in consulting, just feeling more comfortable talking to groups. And then there are a lot of other ways to get involved. There are a lot of different committees at CCA and other organizations, and you can really find the committee that suits your interests. There are committees that are more focused on technical things. There are committees, if you're a very social person, that are more focused on things like recruiting new members or figuring out ways to engage members. So to me, it's really just finding things that either you're very good at or you're very passionate about, and finding the right volunteer opportunities and getting involved. And once you get involved, that's really when you start moving into leadership positions. You start, running committees and moving on to presidential tracks, and become treasurer, secretary of organizations, things like that.
Ellen, same question to you.
I sort of, for me, I would reiterate what Maria said, is, you speak up and put yourself in a position to try something a little different, and then see where it goes. For me, I spent most of my, even though I live in Cleveland now, I spent most of my working career in the Philadelphia market. And the Philadelphia Actuaries Club used to have they still do, for their annual meeting, they invite people who have not yet gotten their credentials in, or who are newly credentialed, and they invite some college students in. So I was at, I think one of the first ever Philly Actuary Club meetings I went to, because the SOA president was there speaking, and this was a big deal to see them. And at the end of it, they came out and they said, we're looking for some officers for next year. And one of the things we need is we need a club secretary, we need a treasurer. And so if you're interested, come up and see so-and-so after the meeting. And I was like, well, what do I have to lose? They're going to say no, right? Like, here I am, this little dippy ASA. I just got my credentials, and I'm not an FSA. I'm not a senior person. So I went up and I underestimated the impact of showing interest when no one else does. And next thing you know, I became the secretary of the Philadelphia Actuaries Club. And I planned meetings and handled continuing education credits for them. Did that for a number of years. Until someone within my firm came and said to me, here, I think there's some things that you could get involved with outside the profession. And then one thing led to another, and I got here. So just, keep an open mind. Look for things that are going to give you the opportunity to do something that you enjoy, and that utilize some of your, your skills and your strengths, or that are going to challenge you to learn something new, or cultivate something that you feel you need to work on. And I'll say, everything I've done, for me, volunteering here at the CCA, has been a very supportive environment. It was okay if I made a mistake and screwed up, because I would learn from it, and there was someone there to help me learn from it in a supportive way.
And just following up on that, I think you can find in actuarial organizations opportunities that you may not be able to find in your own firm. If you take my firm, for example, Willis Towers Watson, it's a huge firm. I'm not going to be in a senior leadership position at Willis Towers Watson. I'm not going to be leading, a worldwide sales effort in a particular product or something like that, because it is the way a very large organization works is it's more people who are less technical and are more business focused who will get those roles. So as an actuary, I've gotten to have a lot of leadership roles and ability to run committees and things like that within CCA that I would not have gotten at Willis Towers Watson. And I can imagine that if you work for a very small firm as well, it's a very, very similar situation. You won't have the same opportunity to run a large scale project where you may within CCA or another actuarial organization.
That's great. And that's actually the next topic that I want to tackle here is volunteering.